Today we're going to take another look at using the OP-80 paper tape reader with the Altair computer. Now the OP-80 was an amazing little paper tape reader. It only cost $75, which was a fraction of the cost of pretty much any other reader on the market. But even though it was inexpensive, it was a very fast, very reliable little paper tape reader. Thinking about the teletype that was probably the console for your early Altair computer setup, it would take about 12 minutes to load 8K Basic from paper tape. But with this little paper tape reader, you could load 8K Basic in under a minute. It was a good 10 to 20 times faster than using the teletype paper tape. And on top of that, it was reliable. It was more likely it would work first try and not need a retry as often as it was with the teletype paper tape reader. The main cost savings was the fact that the transport mechanism was eliminated. It was up to you to pull the paper tape through this reader. The other cost savings was the illumination for the optical reader was a desk lamp. You provided the desk lamp, and it was up to you to figure out exactly how high, how far away that desk lamp needed to be put, so that based on the intensity of your bulb and the opaqueness of your paper tape, everything worked right. But once you had that formula figured out and you knew the sweet spot, it was very reliable, very repeatable. You could do it over and over again. Now the one downside of using a third-party reader like this, or any third-party peripheral, is that Altair software didn't provide support for it. So if you wanted to boot BASIC from the front panel using a bootloader, you would have to write your own bootloader or maybe modify one of Altair's bootloaders. Likewise, if you wanted to use their bootloader PROM, well then you would probably need to patch their bootloader PROM to recognize this OP-80 paper tape reader. Now even once you got BASIC loaded, then to use BASIC to load programs, you would then have to patch BASIC in order to read from your OP-80 or other device instead of one of Altair's devices. So that's one of the downsides of using a third-party reader. However, what we're going to demonstrate today is a way to interface this paper tape reader to the Altair where absolutely no custom software is required whatsoever. So we're going to do a video cut here and come back and take a look inside this computer and see how this went together. The computer we're going to use for this is an original Altair 8800 computer that you see here. And inside we've got just 4 boards. 3 of these are original Altair or MITS boards. There in the back, this is the 16K static RAM board from MITS. That's all the RAM we have in our system. Next to that is the 8080 CPU board. And then this is the 2K EEPROM board from MITS. That board uses up to 8 of the 1702A EEPROMs. Those are only 256 bytes each. And the main reason we have this board in here is to use Altair's multi-boot loader PROM. That's the PROM that allowed you to boot Altair paper tapes without having to use the front panel to toggle in a bootstrap loader. And since we're talking about wanting to do things quickly with this paper tape reader, I figured we ought to have a boot PROM so that we did not have to mess with toggling in those bootstrap loaders. Okay, finally is this board on the end. This blue board is made by a company called Solid State Music. This board, this company started making boards very early on. It would have been available back in the time of the OP-80 and the original Altair. This board is very handy to have. It's very configurable. It has 2 serial ports on it and 2 parallel ports. It's called the I/O4 for those 4 different items of I/O. It uses an older style UART that had no status register inside the chip. So the status register was actually formed outside the chip with discrete logic. And as you see here, these 2 headers, this allows us to wire status pins from these UARTs to status bits in the register that the program reads. So we can make these serial ports look like some other serial boards that are out there. So right now, this one is strapped to look just like Altair's original serial board. That's the 88SIO. So as far as software is concerned, we have an 88SIO serial port for our console in the computer. But what's handy is we didn't actually have to install a separate board. We're using this board. Okay, and this board also has the interface over to the paper tape reader. That's this parallel cable you see right here going in through a parallel port on this board. Now the way we have this set up is it's at I/O address 6 and 7. Address 6 is the status register, 7 is the data register. That happens to match the Altair cassette interface. We've also got the status register wired so that the data available flag, when a byte comes in from the reader, sets the exact same bit position, the exact same polarity in the status register as the Altair cassette. So as far as software is concerned, that OPA-80 tape reader looks exactly like the Altair cassette. And that's why we don't have to write any software at all to support the reader. If you want to load BASIC from paper tape, you can key in the Altair cassette bootstrap loader on the front panel, and it would work because this board makes the OP-80 look just like the cassette interface. Or what we're going to do is use the multi-boot loader prom, and on the front panel just set the switches to specify the cassette interface for loading. Likewise, once you have BASIC up and running, then when you want to load programs, you can just use the cassette load command in BASIC, cload, to load a program, because it goes out to address 6 and 7 to look for data, and that's where we have this OP-80 set up using the exact same status register format as the cassette interface. All right, so the cable we see here, this is parallel cable. This runs over to the OP-80, but as you see here, and as you'd expect, the pinouts of the two are not identical. The Altair cassette, excuse me, the Altair interface board, the IO4 we're using here, has a 14-pin header, and the OP-80 uses a 16-pin header, and the pinouts are totally different. So I've made this little board to adapt between the two so that we can just use simple ribbon cables on both ends without having to do any hand wiring. Now the minimum order for that little adapter board was very large, so I've got plenty of those boards. So if any hobbyists out there want to go ahead and do this as well, just contact me by email. You can see a link down there below the video, and I'll be glad to send you one of those little boards at no charge to make your life easier doing this. All right, so what I'd like to do next is we'll go ahead and set this paper tape reader up, and we'll put the 8K Basic on it. We'll load 8K Basic and get this up and running, and then we'll show how we can load a program using the cload command. So we'll do that next. I now have the 8K Basic paper tape loaded into the OP-80 reader, and as you can see I have the desk lamp on. And now we'll go ahead and get the computer ready to boot from that paper tape. Go ahead and turn on the machine, give it a hard reset, and rather than entering a bootstrap loader on the front panel, I'm going to use the Altair multi-boot loader prom to load the tape. That's up at 177000. That's the address of the multi-boot loader prom. We examine that address. That gets us the first instruction in that prom, and also sets the PC to that so it's ready to run. But before we run it, we have to tell the multi-boot loader prom which device we're loading from, and that's on these lower 4 sense switches. A value of 30011 tells the multi-boot loader prom that we are loading from the cassette interface. And again, as you recall, we have made this paper tape reader come in through the IO4 board looking exactly as if it is the cassette interface. On the upper 4 switches, we need to tell BASIC what serial port is being used as a console terminal once it's up and running. And again, we use the IO4 board and strapped it to look like Altair's original 88 SIO serial board, and that is specified by entering a 20010 on the upper 4 switches. So here's our console serial port, which is an 88 SIO. This is the this is the loader port, and it's going to be the Altair cassette. All right, it's ready to run. Let me zoom back a bit here so we can watch the paper tape load process and the computer at the same time, hopefully. All right, so I can hit run and start pulling the paper tape. Now this whole process only takes about 30 seconds or so instead of the 12 minutes it takes on teletype. And as you can see back there in the back, my despooler is just a good old paper towel holder. Sitting there next to this paper tape is the lunar lander. We'll load that program once we get BASIC up and running. When this completes, you'll see the light pattern on the front change. There you go. You saw it change. That's because we're up and running BASIC now. Let's go over here and take a look at the terminal. And there's our memory size prompt that lets us know we got BASIC running. I'll hit return there. Terminal width, I'll just hit return. Want sign, cosine, I'll say yes. And there we are. Altair Basic 8K version up and running. And we can see that it's working. Nothing's in memory right now. So what I want to do is now load the Altair version of Lunar Lander that runs under Altair 8K Basic, and I can load that with a cassette load command. Cassette load, you specify the file name to load in quotes. Now in reality, the C load and C save only use the first letter of whatever you type, but it does have to match that first letter. And in the case, this tape was saved with the name Lunar, so that L will match. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and try to load this tape while we're filming here. Unfortunately, I got a pile of paper tape on the floor to avoid. All right, let me see if I can get this done quickly. Slide it under these rails. Let me get that straight across there. All right, that should do it. All right, I'm gonna go and press return now on the computer to start the C load. All right, so C load in Basic is now running. I can just load this Lunar Lander program, and it thinks it's coming in from cassette. This is actually a lot faster than the cassette was too. All right, that's done. Come over here and look at the screen, you can see it now says OK, because that process completed. If you take a look, you can see here's the Lunar Lander program. Pretty good sized program, that ran pretty quick. Let's go ahead and give it a whirl. No for instructions. And let's just go for a free fall. And now let's start putting on some brakes. What do you know? Perfect landing. Took a while, I figured that one out. It's no fun when you see the answer, but we'll say no for another mission. All right, well that does it. So OP-80 paper tape reader, super fast way to load programs, even if you have a teletype. And making it interface as one of Altair's devices, in this case the cassette, makes it super easy to use that to load programs and to load Basic with no custom software whatsoever. The only downside is you can't save to it. But with a switch box, an RS-232 type switch box and an RS-232 interface to your teletype, that's how I have it set up, I can do a C save to the teletype and actually save programs and have the teletype punch them by selecting the selecting the teletype on IO address 6 and 7 like the cassette serial port. So anyway, pretty cool little reader. And again, I have more of those interface boards to adapt the OP-80 16-pin dip to the IO4 board's 14-pin dip. Feel free to contact me if you'd like to do one of those, if you'd like to have one of those so that you can do something similar.